In 1833, a ship full of women sank just off the coast of France. 108 of them drowned. Not because they couldn't swim to shore. Shore was visible. They drowned because no one would let them take their clothes off to swim. These women weren't sailors. They weren't passengers. They were prisoners, convicts, being shipped to the other side of the world for stealing bread. Between 1788 and the 1850s, Britain exiled more than 24,000 women to Australia, forever. Most people picture convicts as hardened men in chains, but the women's story is far stranger and far more important than history remembers. So, why bread? Why ribbons? Why a stolen petticoat? Because 18th century Britain had no safety net, no welfare, no unemployment pay. Lose your job, lose your husband, lose one harvest, and your family starved. These weren't hardened criminals. Most were poor women doing whatever it took to survive. It could be a stolen ribbon, a length of cloth, a few coins from someone richer than them. Crimes that today would mean a fine could, back then, end in exile for life. Thousands of crimes, even minor theft, could legally end in transportation, or worse, the gallows. Judges often saw exile as the merciful option. Once sentenced, these women vanished into a system built to forget them, locked in overcrowded jails, then marched in chains to the docks. Picture the scene. Crowds gathered along the waterfront. The harbor smelled of tar and salt water. Guards checked names off long ledgers, as if a life could be reduced to a single line of ink. Families lined the water's edge, children screaming for mothers they'd never see again. Mothers wept. Some women looked back one last time. Most couldn't bring themselves to. And then, the ship sailed. The voyage could take 6 months. Conditions on board varied wildly. Some captains treated the women decently. Many didn't. Below deck. Disease, storms, starvation rations, total darkness. Disease could spread in days. A bad storm could last a week. The air below deck stayed thick and stale for weeks at a time. Rations ran short long before the journey was even half over. Not every woman who boarded made it to Australia. Some were buried at sea instead. No one knew, climbing aboard, whether they'd survive the crossing, let alone what waited on the other side. Imagine that. Months at sea, with no idea if you'd ever see land again, let alone home. Serious arrival didn't mean relief. The colony needed labor, and women were the labor. Most were assigned to settlers or government officials, cooking, cleaning, washing clothes, raising other people's children. Others were sent to factories or government institutions, doing whatever work the colony needed done. Disobey, and the punishment was brutal. Solitary cells, hard labor, public humiliation. Some employers treated them fairly, many didn't. Years of unpaid service stretched ahead with no guarantee of when or if it would end. Letters from home took the better part of a year to arrive, if they arrived at all. This wasn't freedom. It was servitude with an ocean between you and home. But here's what the history books leave out. Many of these women didn't just survive. They rebuilt. They earned their freedom. Started businesses, bought land, became landowners, something most of them could never have done back in Britain. Some married, some raised families on land they actually owned. Women who arrived in chains with nothing, built entirely new lives from scratch. Can you believe that? The very colony that began as a prison eventually became home. Over time, many former convicts became respected, even prosperous members of their communities. The very colony built to punish them became the place where they finally had a future. Ironic, isn't it? Britain exiled them to break them. Instead, it gave some of them the one thing home never could: a chance to start over. Today, somewhere between 1 in 5 and 1 in 7 Australians can trace their bloodline back to a convict. Many of them back to a woman who arrived in chains, owning nothing, known by a crime instead of a name. These women helped build families, towns, entire communities. Yet for generations, their stories stayed buried in old paperwork and forgotten records, rarely spoken of even by their own descendants. History remembers kings and generals, but it was built, too, by women who refused to disappear. And that's a story worth remembering. If you discovered today that one of your ancestors had been transported across the world for stealing bread, how would you feel? Tell me below.